Yes.
All right, so I'm Kelsey Peronto, and this is the Seattle Promise Scholarship Program. I'm here representing North Seattle College. That's the campus that I work at that partners with Ingram. However, next year for juniors, class of 2020, Seattle Promise is going to be applicable to all three Seattle colleges. So right now, where Ingram students could use the Seattle Promise was just at North Seattle College. It's great for a lot of reasons. It's close by. We have a connection with Running Start. A lot of Running Start students go to North. However, we don't have all of the same programs as the other schools in our district. So if you have a student who's very interested in culinary, for example, Seattle Central or South Seattle might actually be a better bet for that student. So in addition to being able to use the scholarship at all three campuses next year, there are going to be some changes thanks to the levy passing in November. All Seattle public high schools, so all 17 public high schools, are going to be eligible for Seattle Promise to go to any of those three campuses. So this year I've enjoyed working very closely with Ingram students, and the previous year too. I have a cohort of students from Ingram who attend North right now. Next year I will still get to work with Ingram students, but I'll also be working with Ballard High School and Lincoln, and we'll be hiring some outreach specialists to work at the other schools as well. So here's some of the lovely faces of our students attending North Seattle College. You may recognize some of them. This was taken at our summer bridge, which is one of the events that's part of the programming. And so this is the first cohort of students that graduated from Ingram in 2018 and began attending North through Seattle Promise. Seattle Promise has also been at Seattle Central this past year and a little bit of a smaller scale as well. So Seattle Central partners with Garfield High School, and they have, again, similar to us and Ingram, have a small cohort of students who have been going through Garfield and going through Central. And then South Seattle College has been running what's known as the 13th year. Actually, a lot of our students still call Seattle Promise the 13th year. I still call it that sometimes because I forget, but 13th year program has been running for more than 10 years at 4 high schools in the South End. So they have a long history of programming a large cohort of students from those 4 different high schools, which is Chief Sealth, Rainier Beach, West Seattle, and Cleveland High School attending South. So all of this has been the program that we kind of established to build into Seattle Promise, and then Mayor Durkin, who's pictured here with some of our students, Mayor Durkin kind of championed this legislation that would let us open it up to all Seattle public school students so that they would have opportunities to pursue post-secondary education for free. So what is Seattle Promise? I think everybody has kind of heard or read in the news about 2 free years of tuition, free college. There's a lot of support behind that, but I think the most important thing about it is that there's support applying for financial aid and college applications and kind of personal support for students who are interested in this process. A lot of students and a lot of families don't know the financial aid that they qualify for. I know there's a financial aid session tonight, and I strongly recommend going to it because financial aid can be an incredibly confusing process. But that support with either the FAFSA or the WASFA application, depending on what the student qualifies for, is really important because they might actually qualify for more money than the Seattle Promise would cover. So for students who have the most economic need, they could pay for books and fees, which are not covered by our scholarship. They could have additional money that they qualify for either federally or through the state that would really support them through their entire college education. And you need to apply for the FAFSA or the WASFA every year. We just had a financial aid deadline, so I'm probably going to hammer really heavy on financial aid because it's such an important step in the process. So for Seattle Promise students who want to be part of a cohort, they also have full coverage of any tuition expenses remaining after other scholarships or financial aid. And so what that means, we're what's known as a last dollar scholarship. So let's say, to keep it really simple, a student's tuition cost is going to be $1,000. They qualify for $500 of financial aid. Seattle Promise would cover the other $500 so that they can attend school. Like I mentioned before, it does not cover books and fees, and so I think that's important for families when they're planning ahead. There's still going to be some expense associated with attending college if they don't income qualify for financial aid. However, the biggest expense of just tuition is going to be covered by this program at Seattle colleges. That tuition expense is covered for either 2 years or 90 credits, and that's the typical window of time and number of credits it takes to get one associate's degree. Really what we're looking at is not just bringing students into the college, but helping them complete. So we want them to be able to be competitive in the workforce, we want them to have professional opportunities, we want them to walk away with a degree instead of starting and then not being able to finish. We also want them to be able to transfer to the school that they want to go to. So if their long-term goal is to go to the U, but they're not ready for that, if their long-term goal is to go to Wazoo or Western or out of state or Ivy League, wherever it might be, we want to help get them there with the access to the college and then the support through the program. We have some college readiness workshops to help prepare students for that transition from high school to college. That was a rocky transition for me, and I had a lot of support from my family and from my community. So for students who might not have that support, it's really important for them to understand that high school might operate one way and college might look really similar, but there's some things that aren't very clear in that process that have changed that we really want them to be prepared for. So I mentioned financial aid before, but we also offer support with placement testing or placement into the classes, like their math and English class that they may need to take. Offering that support and kind of demystifying the process has been really important for our students so they don't get stuck in the middle of that. And then there's continuing guidance and mentorship throughout this says first year of college, that's a 13th year mainstay. It's actually for the first 2 years, their whole 2 years of their associate's degree at the college of their choice. Right now that looks like me, I think my next slide has, no, not yet. That looks like me and the other outreach specialists that work at the other schools. However, like I mentioned before, we're a program that's rapidly growing and scaling up with the passage of the levy. So there will be some new faces in the mix. We're going to be splitting outreach specialists who are helping with that kind of onboarding in the high school support process to get into the school, and then retention process, who are the main supports that help the students throughout their school career. Who qualifies for Seattle Promise? So in addition to this being applicable to every Seattle public school student, the Seattle colleges are an open enrollment institution, which means it's not a competitive enrollment process. There's no GPA requirement to get into the school. It's very important for students to pay attention, to work with advising and tutoring, and to pay attention to their GPA once they're in school so that they can maintain their financial aid. But there's no GPA requirement to get in. There's no essay needed. They need a high school diploma to be able to go to the Seattle colleges. And then students that graduate from Seattle Public High School, what's unique about Seattle Promise as opposed to, let's say, College Bound Scholarship is there's no income requirement for students to be eligible for it. So regardless of family income or personal income, GPA, regardless of family background, citizenship, all students are eligible to apply for Seattle Promise and receive it. They might be interested in transfer's degree, or they might be interested in an associate's or a professional technical program. So not every student who's graduating high school is interested in transferring to a 4-year, but they might be really interested in becoming a medical assistant, or they might be really interested in a phlebotomy certificate, something that's going to help them get into the workforce in a specialized degree, but not require additional education beyond that first year. Those programs are also covered by Seattle Promise. Participation is key. Oh, go ahead.
What was that program?
The second one I said?
Phlebotomy?
Phlebotomy, so the people who draw your blood at the doctor's office.
Oh.
Yep, we have a certificate for that, which several students have been.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that had a name.
All right, so for students, how they become a Promise Scholar, senior year is when all the magic happens. We have an application to the scholarship and the application to the college. So just as though somebody was applying for a scholarship that they might use towards their tuition at a 4-year university, they complete those 2 applications. All of these are housed online. We tried to make it as easy and accessible as possible, and we're always kind of taking feedback about like, hey, what support do students need through that process? I spend a lot of my time working through that process with students to make sure they get the applications completed. The third apply checkmark on that list is applying for financial aid, and I would say that if there's only one lesson people learned tonight, it's to apply for financial aid very, very early. It's actually not the whole process to just apply for the FAFSA or the WASFA. There might be completion for the financial aid file that the individual financial aid office requires, which can mean like requesting tax documents and doing things that take time. I'll let my colleague Rami talk about all the financial aid process, but starting early is actually the most effective way to get the full financial aid file finished, and it might not be done just with a FAFSA application. For Seattle Promise students, we also have 2 events that they participate in leading up to going to college, which is Readiness Academy. That's actually coming up for the current group of students on May 15th. That's an event that's focused on registration and placement. So they actually register for their first quarter of classes so they know what they're taking in the fall. And we use that placement to support to figure out what math or English class they might be starting in. If they're starting a certificate program that doesn't require those, what their elective courses are going to be that help them get through that certificate. But really, it's their first opportunity to come to campus, get familiar with it, meet with our advising team, and get registered for their courses. And then the second event that they participate in is Summer Bridge, which happens later in the summer. For us, it's typically September 10th and 11th. And that is like a full extended orientation to the campus. They have an opportunity to meet with faculty members, practice accessing office hours, meet with our counseling staff, disability services, really the whole, there's a lot of different offices in the college that you might need to access for different reasons to get different things, and we want to bring them to one place to get familiar with that and help them seek out that support so they can start out really successfully. And then the last and most exciting step is to attend classes in the fall. Seattle Promise students attend classes full time, so we kind of looked at the research that supports completion of degrees, and being a full-time student is the likeliest way to complete a degree. And so students are required to register for, full-time is generally 12 credits or more. Of course, for every rule there's an exception, so if there was some kind of hardship a student was going to incur, if they had to do that a particular quarter, they would need to talk to their Promise specialist about how to handle that. And then here's a little just kind of timeline view of what those milestones are. So Readiness Academy, like I mentioned, ours is coming up in May 15th, but for students who are graduating in 2020, that would be spring 2020 when they're still in senior year. They would attend Summer Bridge late summer 2020, begin fall quarter as a full-time student September, and then we also have a quarterly check-in with their student success specialist at the campus, and that really helps with, we have group check-ins and then individual check-ins. They're certainly not limited to one. I see a lot of my students multiple times a quarter, but really just making sure that there's an opportunity for them to have someone to check in with and make sure they're on track academically. If they're struggling in their classes, what resources might be supportive for them, and just have some of that kind of individualized attention to really support them through the whole college process. Here's the smiling faces of the other outreach specialists that work at the other campuses. So the continuous support, like I mentioned right now, we are all, we're a small team that is growing as the program kind of scales up. So we are all working with both cohorts of incoming students at the high schools that we work with and students who are attending college right now. Over the summer, we'll be hiring a team of retention specialists that are really just focused on advising for those students who are at the college level. We also, so a frequent question, especially for students who might start in like developmental math or English, so not college level math or English, is if they have up to 90 credits, they may not finish their full associate's degree by the time their scholarship funding runs out. So they started in Math 98, they have 5 more credits of math that they need to take at the end of their degree. They don't have Promise Scholarship is the situation we're talking about. We look at outside scholarship assistance, or the colleges have a foundation, so if there's foundation scholarship available for them, really as they kind of like get close to that finish line, we want to help them cross, and sometimes that means applying for additional funding as well. So there's support with that, and then filing for financial aid every single year is required, and so making sure our current students are applying for the FAFSA for next year's school as well. And then transferring career planning, so that is the student success specialist, and then we also have certainly at North and at all the Seattle colleges, we have guest advising. So University of Washington, Seattle U, advisors from those campuses will visit and have kind of open office hours for students who are interested in transferring there to help them as they're finishing. So what we really want is like not, okay, you're graduating this quarter, that's it, what's the plan? We want to plan ahead for that, so if they know what math and English class or what specialized elective they need for that pre-med program at the U or whatever it is that their goal is, just having somebody to be that touch point and to reach out to the other schools with them to know what they need to get in and to stay there. So we offer several different degree options at Seattle colleges. I think the most common degree that we see for all of our students, and especially Seattle Promise students, is a transfer degree. So a lot of the students want to go to a 4-year, they might not be ready for kind of that big of a transition where they've got 400 students in class with them in a lecture hall at the U. We have really small class sizes at Seattle colleges, so it's actually really close to what Ingram's class sizes might be, which is just a more supportive transition for some of the students who kind of need that additional step and want to transfer. We also offer professional technical degrees, so each of our websites has a really broad view of what our prof tech degrees are. I mentioned a couple of the medical ones that we have. Those are really popular with our students. There's also electronics, engineering, the two Central and South have culinary programming, there are arts programs, there are lots of different professional technical degrees that range anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to help students get into the workforce with a really specialized focus that they have. There are some apprenticeship programs, especially at South, and so that's really focused on the kind of like earn while you learn, trying a trade and getting connected with somebody who will mentor you through that process. Most of those are housed at South Seattle College. And then we also have Bachelor's of Applied Science degrees. I mentioned this, so Seattle Promise will pay for your first associate's degree. It does not cover the Bachelor's of Applied Science, and an Applied Bachelor's is basically you get your 2-year associates and then you apply for the next 2 years for your Bachelor's of Applied Science. We have those degrees, and I think that's important because not a lot of people know that we have 4-year degrees at North and at Central and South. But that's not covered by the Promise program. It's just a good thing to think ahead to. The one that comes to mind is real estate, which is a really popular degree right now, in a really popular industry right now. So there is kind of the associates portion of that could be taken care of with Promise, and if they were interested in going on to the BAS degree, they have that option. So the deadlines included on here, this is what we're aiming for just about every year. There's 2 helpful little pop-ups here. Like I mentioned before, applying for the FAFSA or the WASFA is not the only step for financial aid. So the #1 message to remember is that applying early is very helpful. It helps make time for corrections that may be made to it. It helps to gather tax information that might be necessary for the additional financial aid process. But usually we look at completing that first round of applications, so the scholarship application and admissions by February 15th. I believe next year it's February 14th, just based on the calendar. But February is when we're looking at completing those, and then by March is what we've looked at for completing financial aid. This is just a little sneak peek of the FAFSA and WASFA websites. You only choose one, and again, I will let the financial aid section talk about what you would choose and why, but the short version is that FAFSA, federal financial aid, students who are documented qualify for federal financial aid, and students who are undocumented would qualify for the WASFA or state aid. And so helping figure out which of these you should apply for, that's one of the things that my colleagues and I do when we're working with students in the schools. And then here's our 2 events, more of a deep dive. So May of senior year is when Readiness Academy happens, and then Summer Bridge, I believe I mentioned, is 2 days in early September. And then the most exciting step, beginning classes as a full-time student. So this is who I am. This is my smiling face. This is how you can get a hold of me. We also have a district Promise support, so especially for really general questions about the program itself, how it's scaling up, policy-based questions. I feel like that email is a really great place to reach. It's also a great place to reach if you have questions about the other campuses. I will have office hours, so I currently have office hours at Ingram 2 days a week, and then next year I'll have the same, and I'll be at Ballard and Lincoln as well. And then just to get a little peek at our website, this is where I think the most, where I would recommend finding the most updated information. So we are adding to this really as the program scales up and as we grow really frequently, but it has just general information, support. There's a portal for students if they have questions about where their application stands, or forms that they might need, or appeals forms, and then our contact information and our district level contact information is included as well. So that is really all I have for this evening. Any questions that I didn't answer for you?
Sure, I've got lots.
Let's hear them.
Well, online courses.
Yes,
You have those?
we do. They're
And do I have to go to the UW to find out which ones would transfer as prerequisites?
So we have in Washington State, we have what's called a direct transfer agreement, and UW actually participates really heavily in that. So what it means is that there are two things that I would look for. So the direct transfer means that your first 2 years, your associate's degree at one of the Seattle colleges is your first 2 years at UW. Where it gets really important to pay attention to their advising and to work with them is if the specialized program requires something additional. So for example, foreign language requirements, to graduate from North Seattle College, we don't have a self-imposed foreign language requirement, but the UW does. And so if their program requires that, it's gonna be really important to pay attention to what they want. Let's say it's for global business, what they want for that, that's where it's gonna be really important to pay attention to what extra classes
Yeah.
might be required.
She'll have 4 years of AP, IB French,
Oh,
so
completely set for that, yeah.
probably.
Mhm. Really, it's
The-
kind of a like partnership between the schools that's important. That's why that transfer planning is really important,
Yeah.
because each individual student's gonna have a different pathway, and we wanna make sure that they're getting the attention for that.
I'm just cheap. And that's, you know, because she could probably get into a very fine college.
Mhm.
But the advantages of coming out of college debt-free
Are huge.
enormous.
I would absolutely agree.
Because we're saving our ammunition for grad school.
Mhm.
Okay, the EMT program, is that like a 2-year?
The
so
EMT program's actually shorter than that, so I believe the EMT program's only 1 quarter. Don't
That's
quote
it?
me on that. Yeah, but it's a pretty quick one to get through. Extremely hands-on. It's really highly regarded in the community. And
Yes.
one thing that I do know that's important to be careful of, the tuition is lower in the EMT program and the fees are higher. So paying attention to that breakdown would be really critical for someone. Seattle Promise will pay for the tuition, but the fees will be higher.
That's why she's interested in North Seattle,
Mhm.
is for that program. But it's only a quarter long.
It's a short program, and a lot of our, if not all of our shorter degrees are what's called stackable. So basically, you might do EMT and then have another step up that would be in the medical field as well. So it might be more skilled medical assisting that goes into that, and then there's another step up from there. So it doesn't have to just be that certificate or
Yeah.
that program. It sounds like long term there might be some plan, like UW and all that. Is
See-
it medical that she's interested in, or?
Well, yeah, you know how it is. Sure, okay?
Yep.
I mean, things could change.
Yep.
But I guess the track I think that might work would be online courses, EMT, medical stuff, and working,
Mhm.
you know, as as an alternative to, you know, going to Wazoo and partying down.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like about this program is that, like, the expectation that we know exactly what we're gonna do when we're 18 years old is maybe not a realistic one, and there's all this pressure on it that students feel, that parents feel, that, you know, trying to give advice about it, that advisors feel, where we're like, well, now we know how the system works, and really, like, it's a lower risk way to try some of that stuff out and learn a little bit about yourself. Like that's something that a lot of my students are processing right now, where
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, I really like this program, or I thought I really wanted to do business, and then the accounting sequence is required for that, and it turns out I hate accounting. So it's a lower risk way to try that out and do some of that self-exploration that's really normal in college.
Then
but
at 35, they discover like you can actually like go to work in
Yeah.
accounting.
Yep, you can.
So, I mean, at some point you have to like accept the fact that we go to work.
Yeah.
And so that would be like part of the component of
Mhm.
this, right? Would be like working at some place that's scalable.
Mhm.
You know, there's plenty of opportunities in tech and
Mhm.
REI and stuff like that.
Lots of places, yeah. Yeah, I can't speak to it in a whole lot of depth, but certainly there, like, in terms of students who want to work and go to school at the same time too, like, I think a lot of our programs are hands-on enough, especially like the kind of medical and tech ones that we have. Students who qualify for work study might be eligible for a work study position in their field, and then there are some internship opportunities that are coming through for community college students in general, and Seattle Promise students in particular that are in this community that are pretty competitive jobs and sites that are really exciting. It's so brand new that I don't have great information about it, but certainly there can be that kind of like, okay, attending school, particularly online classes like you mentioned, freeing up your schedule. I will caution though, online classes are a lot more work than students typically think that they might be, especially the self-direction you need to manage your own timeline for it. So a lot of my students have really struggled in those classes.
Yeah, not this one.
Yeah.
I think
You'll
just,
be just fine.
yeah, just based on the way that she handles herself. But the concern would be, you know, will you know, take her after, you know, in a transfer situation?
Mhm.
How often do they take transfers?
So the U commits to taking 33%, that's an important difference. 33% of their students are transfer students. So I don't feel confident saying, yes, this is the path to
you
get
have to
in
do
or
well.
not. Yeah, you do, you absolutely do. So it's still, I think, no matter what, it's still a really competitive school. And the most important thing is gonna be having the work ethic it sounds like your kid has, and being interested in those things and getting those high quality grades. I do know that for some people, like I can speak to that kind of like social and emotional transition, like high school to college, that can be really rough on some students. And so
Yeah.
I do think this is a little bit of a softer landing to help
That's
step
right.
into it. It's different from the college experience where you get to live in the dorm and do, you know, like you're moving away from home for the first time. We're a commuter school, so we don't have on-campus housing right now.
Right.
But for some students, that's exactly what they need. So I think I can say a lot about that in terms of like, the U's a really competitive school, and so I think the most important thing is just the work and support that they have in college. Or in high school too.
Can I clarify a couple things that I often hear?
Yes.
So Running Start students
Mhm.
can still qualify for Seattle Promise.
Yes, they can.
But the important thing is that it's only up to 90 credits.
That is correct. So it's only up to 90 credits that apply to their first degree. And that is really important and can get really in the weeds for individual students, and that's why the advising piece is really important. So really, if a Running Start student I have someone who started in junior year, they got a lot of Running Start credits, and they're looking at graduating this summer, or one has already graduated from North, which is awesome. But they got up until the point of their graduation for Seattle Promise, and then it stops there. It's not going to be applied to like an applied bachelor's degree or something like that, or a second associate's. And then there are some students who just got a few credits in Running Start, or maybe they tried it in junior year and took a break from it. Those credits still either transfer in if it's from another school or count towards their transcript, and then they can complete their degree with the Seattle Promise.
And then they have to go after Ingram graduation. They
Yes,
can't do
they
a
do.
gap year.
Yes, they do. So we have a cohort model for this right now. So a lot of students and parents have actually asked about a gap year, a planned gap year. The cohort model that we have, you are graduating in the spring and then you're attending in the fall.
This is the gap year.
To go to
For some.
To
Yeah,
go
for
to
some,
the,
yeah.
well, I mean, as far as like going off to college,
Because it is
And
still that,
having the
still at
whole-
home and yeah.
college experience,
Mhm.
which if somebody's not ready for the independence, if they're not, if they don't really understand the financials, it can lead to some terrible expectations for life, because like, it's not just a party, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Did I answer all of your questions?
Well, I'm sure that I'll come up with a few more, but, not right now, I guess. The transfer option is the most important. She wanted to take the EMT program.